Yeah.
All right. All right. It's the most interesting.
Okay. So one thing I really found interesting in this poem is the anti-metaphors that are in it. So that's kind of just like when it flips it on you. So it's like this line right here is lust and action until action lust. So it kind of starts out as like lust and action and then action to lust. And that's just kind of flipping it, which is how like the author sees it. It's like, oh, I saw this as a good thing until after, and then it flipped to bad. And they do that a lot throughout the poem. So I just think it's really interesting that it's showing his opinion through the way he's writing it. So he's saying, yeah, I thought of this as a good thing at first too, but just like my writing switching, my opinion's also still switching.
All right, so I'm also kind of at the top here, but in this line where it says, is perturbed, murderous, bloody, full of flame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust. That's just like a lot of very extreme words that are coming at you. You got savage, extreme, rude, and those are kind of like raw emotions that are really difficult to control. Like, you know, when you're angry, you go too far and you say things that you're gonna regret. Well, it's sort of comparing that with the action of lust, where it's like uncontrollable and you just really want to do it in that moment. And then afterwards you're like, well, it's so correct. So that's why that makes sense.
All right, so my favorite line was this one later in the poem, "A bliss and proof," and proved very well because it states that sex itself is very blissful because of the mystery beforehand and the intensity of lust, but afterwards, the dream is more related to a nightmare, especially with the relation to hell in the very last line, making his regrets about his relations to this woman very prominent and almost more self-aware than other sonnets.
Yeah, good. Okay, everybody else, what do you think works really well in this particular sonnet? I'm going to start because what Kale was saying about those extreme words, I think, is really important. So the poem, like all Shakespeare sonnets, are written in iambic pentameter, right? For the most part, this is in iambic pentameter, except right there, where it's like savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust, perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame. Like all of those words, I think you could call them spondees, because they're just all emphasized. You can't make it fit into that pattern. So I really like that, like the rest of the poem, it's like, oh, I'm being very careful about the way I write it. I'm being very, maybe even reserved about my emotions, you know, but when I get to that part, when I'm like thinking about how ashamed I am of what I have done, I've got these like, just like unruly words that kind of like, yeah, kind of come at you. They assault you. That's the right word. Like your emotions. I know everything I say now feels like a pun, but okay. What else works about the poem as you look at it? What stands out to you?
Something that I right now. 5 lines in the bottom, where it says had, having, and in quest to have, that just gives like past, present, and future to the poem.
Yeah, it's kind of feels like he's like constantly obsessing over this particular emotion. Like he can't get out of this mindset then, past, present, and future. Yeah.
I mean, one thing I noticed is that, I mean, this might not be, but the E in the spies on the fifth line has an accent, and I feel like that just like adds a little emphasis to the word spies, even though I don't know if I don't usually see that there, and so I'm not sure if it's just like how you're supposed to say it, but I feel like that just has just a little bit more emphasis to that word spies, and like how you despise it.
Yeah, did you guys talk about why there'd be an accent there? It's, it fits into the iambic when you can say it that way, so you have to say despised, you know? And he's changing that, I think him changing that word to fit into the pattern does kind of make it stand out.
So, it says on purpose laid to make the teacher mad, mad in pursuit and such. So, and is the repetition of the word mad, and I feel like that gets back to that mindset of I'm stuck here.
Which is sort of like that chaotic feeling.
Yeah, I like that mad can have the two meanings too. It can be crazy, like this emotion is driving me crazy, or it can be angry, like it is making me angry that I have to experience this emotion. And you kind of get that at the end too, and it's sort of like that feeling of trapped, like him being like, to shun the heaven that leads leads men to this hell. He's like, none of us are going to do that. Like, we are going to be stuck in this trap of like being human, and we're all just going to end up in this hell. There's no escaping it. So there's that like feeling of just like your humanity is what drives you crazy. It's a funny poem, I think.
I think that's what helps it stand out though, is that it just feels really extreme kind of.
Yeah.
Like the other poems were like softening, gilded monuments and white lilies. And
Although
then
that one did have sluttish time. too.
that's
yeah.
true. Sluttish
But
time.
yeah, but you're right.
David.
It's like it feels like an exaggeration, or either that, or like he really hates his ex partner, like whoever that was, like he really hates them. You know.
I looked it up to see who was like the target of this poem, and it was the Dark Lady.
The Dark Lady gets this one.
So-
Interesting.
Did one of the other poems mention a gilded lily?
Oh no, the gilded monuments, and then
Ah,
yeah.
not a gilded lily. I
Also,
missed that.
gilded lily sounds absolutely stunning. I'm now gonna write a poem based off.
It's supposed to be a bad thing.
All right, yeah, you don't want to gild the
Yeah,
lily.
that's why. Yeah, but why? What did you assume? Did the poem have to be good? Like at first, the purity
I
seems
would assume
great.
you'd want the poem to be a good poem.
I don't know what you guys are talking about anymore. Yay! Good presentation. I lost the thread.
No, gilded is like everything
that's my
looks
fault.
pretty on the outside.
Yeah.
But underneath it, it's bad. So like if you say like a gilded lily, and lilies are associated with purity, what do you think?
But isn't the phrase to gild the lily like you're ruining something that was already amazing?
Really?
Yeah, it's like
I think
taking
so.
something that's already pretty good, you've never done any covering it in molten gold, which of course kills it, but maybe it's really pretty now.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. 146. Which group wants to go first? Get it out of the way. Okay, closest to me. You guys go first.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Just puts it over. So violent. Oh, so the art teacher did that.
So I just want to address the ... dots before we start. So it's not that Shakespeare included those, it's that there's been a lot of controversy about what was included there, and no one really knows. I don't know if like they couldn't read his handwriting or what that's about, but that's all that is. So there's just this blank spot where we're not sure. Okay.
Okay, so we have sonnet 146. So first I'll show your theme so that you can sing page as us. But we said the body exists at expense to the soul. So that's what this is talking about. And what's really interesting is this poem starts out right here with an apostrophe saying "for soul," right? So we almost have like a Jekyll and Hyde type of thing where there's two parts that exist to this persona, and he's talking to himself. He's talking to his soul, right? And what he's saying here is it's almost like going back to our thing. We said the body exists at expense to the soul, but he's not blaming his body. He's blaming his soul for almost like his shortcomings and his faults, right? And that's an interesting way to start the poem because it's like he's talking to himself. Another thing that we notice that really contributes to the theme of this poem is starting in the first line, we have "poor soul, the center of my sinful earth," and it repeats that S sound over, right? It's the syllabus and kind of an alliteration sound. And I think what's interesting about that is going back to when we had talked about that plant's poem, right? It has the S over and over. And so what does that do? It kind of creates almost this feeling of like madness in himself, right? It's this S sound and it contributes to the quality of the worrisome, I think. This same sibilance is also repeated down here, where it says, soul, live upon thy servant's loss. And what's interesting about these is we have these two sentences, and what they all connect is they all connect soul, center, sinful. They're all connecting negative qualities, really bringing your attention to those things.
The last thing we noticed is he keeps using all of these words that are like money. So there's like costly, mansion, lease, spend, charge, sell, rich. All these words that aren't very common words to use in a sentence, but he goes out of his way to use words that are related to money. And so he's emphasizing like the term of costing, soul costing. And so by using those words and reiterating that, he is saying that his outward appearance is costing his soul.
Awesome. Okay, what did you guys like about this poem? And the group that's going next, you don't have to give it away. You're going to say. While you're looking at it again, I'm going to start. So the Elizabethan sonnet, it's 14 lines. And usually the way it's divided up is there's a section of 8 lines and then a section of 7 lines. And you can almost in all of Shakespeare's sonnets, you can divide the octave from the sestet so that the first part of it has a different feel than the second part of it. So I love that you are bringing up the sibilance in both those places, because that means that both sections are starting with the sibilance as a way to like kind of show that we're kind of switching gears and starting a new path, you know? So there's that like pattern there.
Right.
Mhm.
Alright, so I found really interesting was, shall worms, inheritors of this excess, eat up thy charge? Is this thy life's end? And it was just kind of like, you know, when you die, you get buried and your body dissolves. I just thought it was interesting how it kind of brought a little bit of reality to the situation. A lot of it's kind of speaking in metaphors, and death once dead, there's no more dying then. But this is kind of like a little round.
Yeah. And I think that like brings back his mortality, right? And he knows that he's gonna die, and he wants to spend his life, you know, doing what's right. So I think that
On the worms, inheritors of the Exodus, I feel like it's also a biblical reference, because like the Bible with these inheritors of the earth often, and also the line that's like ashes to ashes, dust to dust. If we all return to dust, then that's what worms mean.
Yeah, it's one of his very few religious poems. Anybody else? Yeah, the worms are.
So the last 2 lines, it talks about how death feeds on men, but I feel like at the end it's a reference to Christ coming again, and when like people will become immortal.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, death once dead, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like this idea of eternal life at the end of it. Yeah. Okay, good job. All right, next group. Still talking about death. But you guys, I remember, were saying, no, it's a happy poem about death.
Yeah.
You're right.
You tell, I'm sure.
Brown, like the dirt that the worms live in. Exactly. Worms.
Okay. Yeah, so this is their poem. Do you guys read it again? Or
No.
so some of the things that we found here. So there was a lot that we were looking at that we found. A few of the things like we were looking at like this word dirt, like we didn't really know what it meant. And so we looked it up and it basically means like barren and like there's nothing there. And I noticed that. So it's connected to the word earth, they both rhyme. And by connecting those two words, it's almost like he's saying like earth has nothing for us. It's barren. There's nothing here for us. And that's like really sets the tone for the poem because like this entire poem is about how he sees earth and life as just being useless and like terrible. And the only good thing about this life is that you're gonna die in the end. So that's like that's what we see from those two words connecting. Yeah. So let's do so so with the last line, so with this, it's death instead, and death instead, there's no more death, dying then. So this is like, we see this as like the saving grace of this poem. Because for this, it's like a really sad poem, like saying like how much he fears death and like how death is terrible. But like this line at the end, like makes it happy because it's saying once you die, you can't die again. So there's like, and it's like in this, like death is like the one thing that's going to be terrible in all of our existence. And once you're dead, then it's done. So it's like a happy poem that way.
So also with the soul stuff, so it's like then soul, let thou upon thy servants lost and let that pine. I can't read my handwriting. Aggregate thy store by terms divine into thine hours of dross, within be fed without which no more. It's like once your body is gone, what's left? Because once you're dead, what's left of that. So it's like worms and heritage of this success, eat up thy charge, thy body's end. Then it addresses the soul. So it's like when your body's gone, then your soul live thou upon thy servants lost. It's like inheriting what you have left behind. Yeah.
What else do we like about this poem? We've already said some things. Okay, I want to start again. So Jacob was talking about, I think something that I've kind of failed to talk about that often, which I really appreciate, is why two words rhyming together would have some sort of emphasis on the theme, right? So you're talking about earth and dearth and those two rhyming together, and so that it creates this idea, it connects the idea that the earth is kind of dearth. the earth is barren and doesn't offer us much, right? And so I looked through and I was like, okay, where else can we do that? And I really love that we're looking at array and gay, and it's sort of like this superficial way that what you wear, your array, is going to make you happy, you know, with array and gay. But then by the end, we get to this idea of store and more kind of going together. And it seems like what he's saying is rich no more. If you kind of forsake all of the riches and your emphasis on getting rich in life, then you're going to build up a store of like kind of better things in your soul, you know? So it like starts with the negative way that those end rhymes match up. And then we get to this more like through the negative, because rich no more is a negative phrase, but through the negative, we get to the positive for your soul. So I really like how you were talking about that.
I want to say something about the first line. For soul, the center of my sinful life. I think that's just kind of interesting. Because, like, his soul is the center of him. I feel like is what he's referencing, and he uses the word sinful, which makes it seem like he's made a lot of mistakes and has regrets, and he's worried about dying so soon that he can't fulfill his. Also, it's
Yeah.
So I think that someone that is the narrator dies after being blind, and then it talks about how the soul just lives on, and then second to last line says, "So shalt thou feed on death." So it's like this person who died is living after death, and is like, I guess.
That's interesting. I don't know.
So back to like the two words. I think one word we found was pine and divine. I didn't know what pine meant, so we looked it up and it's like words. So I think it's interesting that pine rhymes with divine. Yeah. Die. Yeah, that's actually really
Awesome. And what kind of rhyme is that called? Internal rhyme, yeah. Just a vocab review.
really.
Lines 5 and 7, or back to continue right on the right. Lines 5 and 7, having so short a lease and then imperative of excess is supposed to rhyme, but you pronounce it lease and then excess, so you have to pronounce it less in order to rhyme with excess. And so I think that continues, like, maybe, on like the money thing that Ethan and Eden were talking about, it's why is the larger cost of so short a lease? And then, but then you have to change it in order to rhyme.
Oh, yeah, so it's kind of like through excess, you're actually getting less. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I really like how the first half of the poem, every other line is a question. And most of those questions seem to be asking, why are you still trying? And I also like how the second half of the poem really seems to say, stop trying, give up.
Or try for something different, maybe. But yeah, it's like stop trying with all of the riches and the ambition and all of that. Give up that stuff. I like that. Yeah.
It's also interesting the connection between money and death. That's like a very strong connection in like mythology and stuff. Like, Charon takes the gold coins to take it to the underworld. There's like in Egyptian times, it's like you have to be surrounded by all your stuff when you die, so you have all the things to carry you through the journey to the underworld. It's very perilous and dangerous. So it's like very interesting that he decides to connect like having material possessions with death.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to reject that attitude about money, though. It's like it's sort of like stop trying to get rich. That is not going to be
It's
the
not
way to
gonna help
lead
you
to
when
your
you're dead.
divinity. Yeah, and your eternal life. Like,
Yeah.
Well done. All right, you love your sonnets even more now, right? Everybody loves their sonnets. We are going to we're going to play a GIM kit to review the poetry terms. So I think I told you last time, there's a poetry test, right, on these terms. So my goal here, the reason that this is really the only test officially that we have this year that you don't get to retake if you want to, it's because you can write about poetry without knowing any of these terms. You could, and you could still get a pretty good score on the poetry test, honestly. If you wouldn't get that sophistication point, but if you were able to talk about all of these terms, but you didn't remember the names, you could still get a good score. However, just knowing the names kind of leads you to know what to talk about with poetry. So it's like once you know that there's a thing called consonants out there, you know that that is a thing that you can analyze on the poem. So it's helping you with your analytical skills to know these particular terms. So before we get into the GIM kit, and get everybody get their computers running. But before we get into that, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to review the vocab words from the blue pages. And I think the best way to do that is to quiz each other on those vocab words. So in your pairs or your trios, help each other study those terms in the blue pages and quiz each other on what the definitions are. Okay, you'll have to do this part on your own.
For this next part, we're going to be doing a GIM kit, so you won't be able to participate in this. So just make sure that you are studying those terms because the poetry test is next time, which is Monday. And that is all for class, I think. There's something at the end of